Hello, I'm Daniel Ospina. I'm an organization designer, which means that throughout my career, I mostly work on figuring out how people should work together. And right now I work as head of governance at Aragon, and I'm also a visiting lecturer at Oxford University. And today I want to share with you one of the trends that I think are the most powerful impacting how people work together, which is this concept of DAOs. And DAOs mean Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, and it sounds a little bit as a mouthful, but imagine this sort of transformation. There was a time where we didn't have online groups. The only way that people could communicate was giving a call to each other or maybe texting each other. But to organize as a group, you actually needed to gather in person. The transformation that happened over the last 15, 20 years is that these groups were enabled, and suddenly we start to have friends from all over the place that will gather to discuss different topics. We start working online. We even had social movements like the Hong Kong protests, Black Lives Matter, and so on that got organized through these groups, digital groups infrastructure. Now, the transformation that is happening now with these things that we call DAOs is that these online communities are not only able to talk with one another, but they're also able to hold assets, essentially to have a sort of online bank account. And as well, they're able to make decisions together. If you ever try to organize, let's say, for example, decide which restaurant you wanted to go to, or where should you go for holidays and so on, with more than 5 people at the time, you know that it's extremely difficult to make decisions with large groups of people. What DAOs enable, what these organizations enable, is to have all the tooling, all the software necessary for these groups to manage assets and make decisions over how they organize together really easily, really quickly, and digitally native. And what this transformation enables, like what this software enables, is that we can start to imagine a borderless ecosystem of teams, where these teams, the people that work in them, can come from any part in the world, come together, where they really enjoy working together because they have so many different possibilities that they can work on that which really matters to them, on that is best suited for their skills, and as well where everyone cares and is empowered to play because they own the network, because this is not some sort of external organization to them, some sort of corporation that is extracting assets, that is telling them what to do, but instead of that, this is their own community in which they, through ownership and through this decision-making tooling, can make decisions, can make proposals, can suggest ideas. And this is the base of these decentralized organizations. Decentralized because instead of having a few decision makers at the top, what we have is the whole community putting their intelligence together to together figure out where they should go. And this leads to better decisions for all the stakeholders, but as well, and people feeling more ownership, a more sense of belonging, more sense of empowerment, participation, and so on, which, as I was saying, helps them to care about what is happening. And this group of new type of organizations, digitally native organizations, is growing extremely rapid. Just in our platform, we have over 1,800 of them created. They are now managing over 2 trillion of assets. And it's starting to affect every single industry. The first one being finance, then the art world, but as well now we're moving into real estate, healthcare, pharma research, and a range of other applications. And so as these sort of new types of organizations, as these DAOs start to become more and more common, you know, as the saying goes, software is eating the world and DAOs are eating software. As these DAOs become more and more common, we start to see a little bit of dilution of what the term means. And it can be easy to forget what's the difference in between a real DAO and something that looks perhaps a little bit like a DAO, but it's not really a DAO. It resembles a little bit more an old, more traditional, more Web2 organization rather than a Web3 organization. So let me share a bit the characteristics, and through these, hopefully expand a little bit on the understanding of what this means. So the first thing, as I was saying, is that DAOs have decentralized decision-making. you can imagine it a little bit the difference in between a dictatorship or a monarchy, where the king or the dictator decides what happens, and a direct democracy. DAOs tend to be a lot more close to a direct democracy, where the community at large can make proposals and anyone can vote on those proposals. So instead of having a single center of power, a single top-down authority, what you have is a decentralized power throughout the organization. The other thing is that DAOs now enable people to join permissionless, meaning you don't have to go through the usual process of making a CV, applying for a job, going through 2, 3, maybe up to 5 job interviews, and then finally saying, okay, actually you're accepted. Now you can see what's happening within the organization. Now you can access the communication channels, you can go and meet the people, and you can find out what problems there are and then try to work on solving those problems or creating new possibilities. Instead of that, DAOs, which, as I was saying, are digitally native, they tend to be open communities. So anyone can become a member, a little bit like in a cooperative. You can pay a small fee and then join the DAO or work your way and earn that membership into the DAO without anyone having to give you permission. And once you have that membership, you can start to see the conversations that are happening inside. And very quickly, by seeing those conversations, you can figure out like, oh, wait a second, they're talking about this problem or this thing, or there is something that I think would really help them and what they're trying to do. Let me work towards that. So you can join permissionless and start adding value from the beginning, which comes in opposition to gated communities or even the corporate model, where you have to ask permission and convince other people to let you add value, but you, from the outside, you don't even know what the culture is like, what the problems are, what the way they work together is, and so on. So as well, this creates a whole revolution in that people start to move from different organizations and figure out the ones they really resonate with, and then they join those. Which also means that quite often people tend to participate in 2 or 3 different organizations at a time, in 2 or 3 different DAOs. Then this as well means that the structure of these DAOs tends to be a lot more of a network rather than a hierarchy of teams. What I mean by this is that as people join these organizations, they start to suggest ideas and they group together with others, like they create a sort of sub-community or a team within the broader network, within the broader community. And together they start to think, okay, what sort of problems do we want to work? Or maybe let's focus on this specific area and let's create some tools or resources to advance this agenda. You know, the different initiatives that work in an organization. But thanks to the decentralized decision making, these networks are not a hierarchy necessarily, but more of a mesh where different networks will provide products and services to one another, and together they will help to advance the purpose of the DAO. And then there's these 3 characteristics as well lead us to these DAOs end up being a bit of a continuum, interwoven with one another. We have people working in multiple DAOs at the same time, bringing ideas from different DAOs. The information is open, so it moves across seamlessly. There is a lot more cross-pollination, a lot more collaboration on innovating, on creating new ideas, which comes in very stark contrast to fake DAOs or even traditional organizations that tend to be a lot more self-contained, a lot more walled gardens. And what this also ends up leading to is that you have between the different stakeholders, and by that I mean the customers, maybe the suppliers, the employees, the different people that together make this organization continue to operate, the investors and so on, there tends to be a lot more collaboration. As the decision making is decentralized, the way for these DAOs to move forward is to find for ways that benefit all, win-win relationships rather than one versus the other. So trying to grow the pie rather than split the pie. And this, of course, means that we start to move away from the plutocracy and oligarchy that has characterized a lot of our traditional forms of organizing up till now. Is, of course, something that takes time and will take a while to catalyze, but the seeds of the trend are already there. And if you can start to see how different these can be from traditional ways of working, you can now start to imagine how this can change very significantly the way we've been working together, and in turn catalyze the next transformation for all sorts of cause, for all sorts of problems, and especially very complex problems that require people to work together rather than to work in isolation. We can think about climate change, the pension crisis that we have, global issues, as well as very complex local issues, can better be served by working as a decentralized autonomous organization, essentially in this more open, more collaborative way of working, rather than traditional forms or these other sort of digital organizations that pretend to be a DAO but doesn't really leverage those properties. The question is then, how do we decide, or how do we go from one direction to the other? Like, what will help us go more towards a real DAO rather than a fake DAO? And for this, one of the main topics of conversation in the Web3 space has been, how do we make decisions? Because the way we make decisions means that over time, if we give all power to a centralized group, they will tend to accumulate more power for themselves. It's a human trait. We like power, power corrupts, as the saying goes. So the way we make decisions is what allows us to decide between going in one direction or going into the other. And in this sense, there is a new trend growing. And again, the word is a little bit of a mouthful, that is called polycentric governance. But what that means in practice is a concept that's been around with us for quite a while, that is having multiple decision-making centers. Or you can imagine, for example, in a tribe, you have the chief, who's dealing with defending the tribe, the administrative affairs, but you also have the elder, who carries the history, who might help deal with questions about morality and ethics and the history and so on. And in the Middle Ages, we have the king and the bishop, or even in a democracy, we have the division of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. So DAOs themselves are starting to mirror this structure where we have different centers of decision-making, different groups within it that together help to stabilize and serve a little bit as institutions for these new type of organizations to work better together, to make better decisions, to avoid plutocracy, to avoid oligarchy, and to better collaborate and better solve problems together. And even we can already start to see how some of the forward-thinking, but not DAO organizations, I mean more like corporations who have been extremely innovative, are already starting to move into more of these network platform sort of thinking. So here you will see, don't try to find the reading. The point is more just visually, you can already see the representations of a corporation called Hire, that they become the #1 IoT corporation. They happen to be a Chinese company. And already the way they're thinking is a range of micro enterprises on a platform that together are collaborating. So these are small teams that buy and sell products and services from one another instead of a functionally divided organization. So instead of having your sales department and on your other side, your HR, and on the other side, your marketing, all of these are brought together into very small teams in between maybe 15 to 50 people that together make decisions, together develop a product or service, and offer that to other teams and services through a sort of market approach. Equally for in a Western organization, this time in the United States, we have Zappos, and Zappos, they're essentially a retailer. They sell shoes online, and they started implementing holacracy, self-management a few years ago, and now they have evolved from that. And what they have is, again, a network of teams with 3 core characteristics. This is the only things that are enforced between those teams. One is that they have some core values, essentially a shared culture. As I was saying, is this idea of a community that has some shared identity, shared culture, that then divides into smaller teams. So they have their core values. They are very customer focused, again, thinking about how can we add value. And then they have a customer generating budgeting. So meaning they own their own profit and loss. They have their own budget based on the products or services that they buy and sell from other organizations. And this helps them as a network to figure out how much should be invested in growing this team or not. And then from here, now we have, let me show you a little bit what one of the more advanced DAOs look like. Now we are very much in the Web3 territory. This is Yearn Finance. They provide a range of finance infrastructure functionalities and so on. And as well, the way they're organizing, you can see that they have different teams. And again, don't try to read because the specifics could be a lecture unto themselves, but it's more this idea that the different teams are not working so much in a hierarchy, but are overall accountable to the community at large, and then have different functionalities that work together as a network. This is, for example, the way it works for us. We have in Aragon, we're starting to get structure in this way. So we have a main DAO where the community, anyone in the community can make proposals and vote on decisions. And this main DAO holds the majority of the funds, but then we can delegate part of those funds to an executive sub-DAO to make some decisions on our behalf in a quick manner. There we have an Aragon court where anyone in the community, if there is an action that they feel goes against the best interest of the community, that is breaching the agreements that the community has made together, they can challenge it using Aragon Court, which is an arbitration protocol. So then there will be some jurors that are drafted and they will decide this action is legal or illegal according to our agreements. We have a compliance sub-DAO that is helping to manage questions around ethics, sustainability, and risk. And as well, we have a tech committee to help us figure out whether we can deploy code quickly or whether we need a code audit as well. And then we have the Aragon Association, which has been our more traditional centralized structure that we're moving away from. But the Aragon Association still manages a range of products for us and hires a group of people to do that happen. So as you can start to see, it's already a structure with multiple sort of subcommittees, but very much based on this concept of we're accountable primarily to the community at large, who can, if they dislike the direction that something is going, they don't have to convince anyone else to ask for permission. They can make the proposal, and then is the community who together decides. So one of the ways that then this impacts all of these, and I imagine is quite a bit of a change. Maybe for some of you, it has certainly been for me. But one of the ways that this starts to impact, particularly in the realm of sales and human resources, is that now there is not a single person to sell to. We're trying to sell to a community rather than sell to an individual. And equally, we operate as a community rather than operate as a small executive team. So we go from a more I mentality to a more we mentality, where we need to reinvent really the way we have been doing most things in an organization, to think, how do we do it as a collective? How can we convince other organizations, for example, to adopt our technology if there is no single decision maker, but rather a community of decision makers? And they might have a specialized subgroup that deals with that, but more likely than not, the range of stakeholders is going to be very, very broad. And we need to create a case in the open where now a lot of the processes for collaboration in between these organizations are not so much selling a very well neatly packaged piece of software with a nicely oiled sales process, but it's more about driving awareness of what each ecosystem is specializing on, helping people to participate in both ecosystems at the same time, and then through that start to make small decisions that get approved by the communities to collaborate. And through those collaborations, slowly small things add up and become to a broader collaboration that can in time even become a sort of merger in between the two communities. But what you have is a bit more of a dance between these networks where they can come closer together or further apart based on small decisions that are made every day rather than very large decisions made in very long cycles. So quite a bit of transformation. So anyway, I hope this is giving you enough curiosity to come and explore and learn a little bit more about this trend. And if you are, the way to join this transformation, to join what we call the fight for freedom, the fight for community empowerment, what you can do is first, search and learn is super important as we move forward in this direction in the future of work, to learn how to find information and consume that information effectively. So Google, look for resources. You'll eventually find your way through, and the skills you pick up on the way are extremely valuable to then be able to operate in these more decentralized organizations where there is sometimes a little bit less guidance, but also more autonomy, and the ability to self-onboard is required. As well, of course, is healing, growing ourselves personally, helping, learning how to work with uncertainty, learning how to sometimes embrace the creative chaos that these can mean, instead of trying to very neatly organize everything in a perfectly clear structure that makes sense to us, but that to some degree might turn other people into cogs in the machine. So that personal development aspect is super important. And of course, the first point is start to collaborate, start to find ways to participate. These organizations are open, receptive to contribute to part-time contributors. Really, any level of engagement, you can engage with them. You might be able to take on different level of projects, but because they're open, there is nothing stopping you from dipping your toe into the water and starting to figure out how these can work. And over time, you will have very quickly learned enough that you can start to think as well, your current organization or a startup that you might want to create, how it might be created with these new technologies that really leverage the power of communities to a degree that we haven't seen nowhere close, anywhere yet, and have fantastic network effects to mobilize these multiple stakeholders, to mobilize everyone around of the organization to work together and do better for all of us. So I hope you enjoy this idea. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope this trigger your curiosity. Thank you.